welcome to Bamboo Chalupas, episode number 34. I am your host, Brett Snyder, the owner of Knucklepuck, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nate Shiver, the author of ShiverWeb.com.
Hello, hello.
So today we'll be continuing on a topic we started in our last episode, talking about the artist formerly known as Google Webmaster Tools, now currently known as Google Search Console, and the ways that you can apply Google Search Console to your marketing campaigns to help either amplify your content projects, whether to identify technical issues. Today, specifically, we want to talk about using Google Search Console to focus on on-page improvements for your website.
Yeah, and last time we jumped around and we looked at, how you can access crawl errors and diagnose a lot of the technical issues. And we're going to start today with the section in Search Console under Search Appearance, where under the label HTML improvements. All right, in the HTML improvement section, it looks straightforward when you look at it. Google tells you, okay, you have missing title tags on these pages, you have duplicate title tags on these pages, you don't have a meta description on this page, and it tells you, what you should do. You should lengthen these, shorten these, whatnot. But I think the key with the HTML improvements report is to not only do what Google says to do, but to use it to find additional issues. So, for example, I like to use the duplicate title tags report, not just to find duplicate title tags and rewrite them, but to find pages on my site that might be cannibalizing each other, or to find technical issues with my site. Maybe I've forgotten to no index a portion of my category pages or my archive pages that I thought were no index, but they're actually not. And, from there you feed back into the technical issues, but you can just keep clicking and diving into these sections to find different ways to optimize not just the title tag and meta description, but also the technical and the content that's actually on the page.
And I think one of the other things for a lot of sites have templated title tags, or at least default templates. So duplicate title tags can also help you identify pages that don't necessarily have, you haven't implemented any title tags. They have their missing title tags, but also if you see duplicate ones where the default template has just simply been applied to it, it gives you another opportunity to identify some of these pages that may be cannibalizing your approach.
Oh yeah, and if you're on the agency side and you're just starting to figure out, okay, what's the site architecture of this new client? This is a great way to shortcut the process of figuring out what is that template, what are some of these core on-page problems that you're going to have to start planning for.
And you can, again, you want to go and see where are you not providing a unique and independent value add here. So agency, whether you own it yourself, the HTML improvements is really easy because best case scenario, you look at it and say, hey, we're doing things well. Or, worst case scenario, you see issues that you need to correct. So it gives you an opportunity to really jump in there super quickly. You can export this information. You can put it into Excel, which I know is where I like to manipulate the data there, to be able to use some filters and kind of do some of the second level analysis Nate was talking about. And so there's a lot of flexibility to this section, especially if you use some of the export features.
Definitely. Well, continuing down the search appearance reports, the next and last one is the site links feature in Search Console. And site links are basically an expanded search result for a query. And it almost always happens when you search for your brand in Google search. And you'll not only get the blue link with the meta description, but oftentimes Google will have, what they see as the 4 most popular or most relevant pages. So, if you search for Amazon, or you search for Apple, you'll get a site link where it'll show, iMac, the iPhone, contact page, login. And in many ways, this is a undervalued feature, especially for companies where your brand is fairly well known, where you have people coming to your site seeking you out. And what the site links feature allows you to do is it doesn't allow you to tell Google what to put in those site links in the search results. However, you can use it to demote pages that Google is already listing. So for example, if Google is listing your privacy page or a contact page for vendors and not customers, you can demote that and try to coach Google into the right direction and listing the right pages, whether it's your login page or a sales page, homepage, that kind of thing.
One of the other things, especially for multi-author sites, something that we've struggled with before, is we'll have authors promoted in site links that have left the organization. So if you have people who are kind of branding based on the people, in a lot of sites, the author pages are very common for the site links. And that's just looking at what's showing up and how it appears in Google Search Console. The other thing, if we're only sticking with Google Search Console, go look at the types of pages that that people are looking for. Look at any previous demotions that were done. It allows you to collaborate across different teams. And so it gives you the chance to control a little bit more how your brand is presented. I think for multi-author sites, blocking, either people who have left the company or maybe people who, if there have been scandals involved, thinking of all the different ways you would want to control what is directly associated with your brand, you can always remove demotions. So say Brian Williams, maybe Brian Williams, he was NBC, right?
Yeah, he was NBC.
Yeah, maybe NBC wants to demote his page for the short term to not draw attention to that. Again, now we're talking about much larger sites if really your brand and things like that are going to come into play there. But if there are scandals associated with it, gives you an opportunity to do reputation management on top of simply just, best practices in terms of branding.
Yeah, I really like that. Well, let's go ahead and dive into what I see as the real meat of on-page tools in Search Console.
Nate did make an argument to have this be the entire episode, so I think there's a lot that we can use with this next feature.
Oh yeah, and that is the Search Analytics report, and this report is actually new to the rebranded Search Console. A lot of SEOs will remember back when it was Webmaster Tools. This was the Search Queries report, and it was justifiably criticized for being inaccurate, not kept up to date, hard to manipulate. Well, Google sat down and tried to really create a much better, more useful tool for SEOs. And while there's still some lingering confusion around search analytics and, what a query is, what a click is, that kind of thing, I think Google really has built a much better tool, much more useful tool in the Search Analytics report. And the key to Search Analytics is really the same key when it comes to using Google Analytics or analyzing any data. And that is, it provides you the raw data. Now, what you do with that raw data is going to be based on your creativity, your imagination, your hypothesis, and your hypotheses. And that's going to be some things that we're going to try to touch on and share our favorite shortcuts to getting data that you can actually use in this report.
And along that same point, this is your data. Remember, this is not something where you're taking estimated. This is not where Google says, here's kind of a general average for all the sites in your industry. This is specifically data designed for you. Your competitors do not have access to this information. Anytime your competitors don't have access to your information, understand that if you're being provided that, it is for a very real reason, because Google wants to empower the people who make the web great. And Nate's right. It is very kind of raw data. They can be a little overwhelming to look at it and say the action items aren't immediately clear. But if you dive in and you get creative, you're going to be able to extract some very significant insights to be able to support the long-term goals that you have for your marketing.
Yeah, and just to cover some of the more basic piece of data that you can pull out, you can sift and sort by queries, by pages, by country, by device, by search type, and you can apply 4 different metrics. You can apply clicks, which is whenever someone clicks on your result that was returned from a query that they searched for, that counts as a click. Now, keep in mind that clicks are not the same as sessions that show up in your Google Analytics. They're separate definitions, and I'll link to a excellent write-up that Lunametrics did explaining all these. But basically, clicks are when someone actually clicks over to your site. Impressions are whenever your URL, whenever your domain that's linked in Google Search Console showed up in the search results, but was not necessarily clicked. Click-through rate is the number of impressions divided by the number of clicks. And then position is your average position for queries or pages within the search results.
So think about that for a second. Let's break that down into how we're going to be able to use these. Clicks are actual engagement with your website. Impressions are how Google is showing you. What type of visibility are you having? Click-through rate just merges the two of those. If you have a lot of impressions but no clicks, you're going to have a low click-through rate. You're showing up, but people aren't clicking. If your number of clicks and your impressions are about the same, it means you're getting a lot of engagement when that visibility is there. So clicks and impressions can almost be thought of as action versus visibility. And then you talk about position, provide some context there to be able to track over time what is the value of a certain position for either if you're in an agency, for your client, if you're working for yourself, for your website. You can start to understand how people prefer to engage with your brand in the search results themselves.
Yeah, and so just to start out with, you can quickly see what landing pages or what pages are driving organic traffic. You can see what are some of your top queries that are driving traffic. But what's most interesting to me is when you start pairing these different metrics. You can start to find what we call striking distance keywords. If you see a keyword that has a really high impression rate, so it's getting the visibility that Brett mentioned, but it has a really low click-through rate, and it's, between 10 and 20 of the average position. So people are seeing it, but they're just not clicking through for whatever reason. Either it's not relevant to the content you have, or the content that you have that's ranking isn't directly relevant for this query. And so you can take that information and go and look at your content, revise it to fit closer to the queries that you're ranking for, or create something completely different.
Striking distance is one of the most valuable things that we do for our clients after about the 6-month mark. Or for clients that come in saying, hey, we've got a ton of existing visibility, or we've been working with them for a while and have established that visibility. It gives us an opportunity to recognize momentum. We can start to see how terms that we have not actively optimized for are starting to show up on page 2 and page 3. It means that just our baseline is that there is some degree of relevance that Google associates with these terms. Now, being able to look at that and say, we have momentum that we did not try to generate. Let's use that. So by looking at these striking distance keywords, one of the things that we'll do on our team is we'll kind of marry this together with Ahrefs and start to see, okay, where are striking distance keywords relative to a particular landing page? You start to kind of use these other tools that are available to you, married with your own data that Google Search Console provides, and you're able to say, hey, look, we're in position 12 for a term that we're not really actively optimizing for, but it seems to resonate well with our users. We see a high number of clicks. We see that the click-through rate is above average. Let's dedicate some resources to try to lean on this momentum rather than attempting to create value from somewhere else when we have information from Google as to what pages they already deem to be valuable for you.
Yeah, and just I had a really interesting example from my personal website where years ago I had written a post about how I factored beats per minute into my running playlist. So the idea is that you run to a faster paced song and you run faster. Well, it's consistently ranked fairly well for playlist and running type terms. But the other day I was looking at Webmaster in Search Console and found that I get a really high impression for the terms BPM counter, beats per minute tool, beats per minute calculator, but no clicks. And I go and look, and that post it's ranking really well for those terms, but I'm not getting any of those clicks. And the takeaway that I had from that information was that when people are searching for a beats per minute calculator, they're looking for an actual calculator. They're not looking for how to use it. They're not looking how to pull it into their running playlist. They want something that they can enter a song and get the data. And so when I go back to revise that post, what I can do is either include that within the post, or say, hey, there's something about this post that Google likes, and I can, if I create a separate tool and link to it from this post, I can kind of use the coattails or the success of this original post to kind of drive additional value to this other tool. And that's the kind of data that you'll only get from Webmaster Tools, and be able to make those calls about how to approach those striking distance keywords that we had mentioned.
And I think the other thing, you want to go really involved with it, build the tool.
Yeah.
If you get down to that and you start to see what people are resonating with people, build the tool. Now, that falls into the what does this tell me in terms of, the amount of investment I'm going to have to do? Does it really align with my audience? Not to discount any of those considerations at all. But if you're starting to see that your site is ranking and people are looking for a particular thing and you're already there, embellish your post a little bit. If you're able to create some of these tools to say, because our audience has asked for it, gives you an opportunity to drive increased traffic, gives you an opportunity to potentially do link building because people are already looking for it and they're already finding you, or at least seeing you among the other available options. When you see something like this and being able to look down to these specific pages, it doesn't just give you a chance to understand what people are looking for. It gives you a chance to be able to create content for those people. The action that kind of comes alongside with that.
Oh yeah, and the other way that I like to approach these striking distance keywords that we mentioned is, if you go into Search Console and you sort by page, and then you pull out the queries that are driving traffic to that page, if you see, and that this page, whatever it is driving leads, driving sales, and you have these striking distance keywords, well, if you don't have a direct path to ranking organically, you can always pay for it and test it to see if the effort's going to be there. Because again, this is your data. This isn't something that your competitors have in their Search Console deck. This is something that you have, and those are keywords that won't necessarily show up in AdWords Planner, in AdWords Keyword Planner. And so you can take that data, drop it into a PPC campaign, run a test, and see how those complement each other and be able to make the call from there.
And so I have kind of a similar, maybe not so similar approach to how I want to go and look at that. In terms of why a page is losing traffic, I want to understand more what is the impact of visibility. Because I think when you say why is it losing tracker, you can go deeper in analytics, you can do all of that. But if we talk about the idea of how do we create a plan based on data from the very beginning. So I want to look at the impact of certain rankings changes with the click-through rate and position overlay. You can actually select multiple options in search analytics to be able to see how different criteria kind of trend based on one another. So the default is clicks, but we talked about impressions, click-through rate, and position. And so you want to first and foremost make sure you're focusing on the appropriate issue. Not going, traffic went down, the site is penalized, when in fact it may be a rankings movement. It helps you diagnose issues with your site. It helps you diagnose where to focus your efforts based on how click-through rate and how position have changed. Because impressions, if you think about impressions for 1 and 3, really shouldn't be that different. It should be the same number of impressions at the same page. But if we talk about position and we talk about the click-through rate related to that position, it helps us understand that, hey, we went from 2 to 3, but there's really not much of an impact here. We don't have to go and divert resources from other areas to be able to try to recover that 2 to 3. Now you may find another page or another search query that says, holy crap, we went from 2 to 3 and we're losing traffic, we're losing sales. This is something that needs to become a top priority. So it helps you to understand the why of things, how your analytics is trending, and give you more insights in terms of how to apply specific tactical action items based on that data.
Yeah, and when you're doing these overlays, I think I like how you brought out how you can apply, not just rankings, but you can also apply different types, different dimensions. So one thing that I had last week was like, holy crap, my average ranking went down, and I thought that it was a rankings movement, not necessarily a penalty, but I thought something had moved. When I went and checked, there was nothing there wasn't a problem there on my end. But when I went to use the country filter, it turned out that, my rankings in India, Pakistan, and Asia had changed, not because my content had changed or because, Google's algorithm had necessarily changed, but simply because they were starting to prefer more geographic specific content around those queries. And so it allowed me to say, okay, hey, there's nothing really wrong with my site. This is just a change with Google's geographic filter. And, it allowed me to make a call based on how big of a priority that was for me.
Right, and I think it also helps you. Seasonality is another one of those things that people generally understand. Like, nobody is surprised when an e-commerce shop increases in traffic at the end of November. But there may be seasonality associated with your site that has nothing to do with it. Maybe it's something where there was a weather disaster in the Southeast and you typically get a lot of traffic from the Southeast. These are things where you can start to understand am I focusing on addressing the appropriate problem? Is there even a problem to address? I think a lot of people want to jump to, oh crap, what happened? What do we do next? The sky is falling. When in reality, you want to understand exactly what happened, because your course of action from that point forward is going to be it relies on the appropriate information that Search Console can provide.
Oh, yeah. And but before we go through kind of our rapid fire list, I did want to point out that we keep talking about historical data, and Search Console provides this data for 90 days, and it's a rolling 90 days. So pro tip is that you should set a reminder on your calendar every 90 days to do an export of all this information so that you do have the historical data saved in your records. Or if you want to get a developer to Search Console also has an API, and so you can also automate this task. But I would say that's very important if you want to be able to make year-over-year comparisons looking at seasonality.
No, that's absolutely right. And that's something where we do that a lot with Google My Business for local tracking, where they'll give you your impressions, your clicks. We try to get in there. We have alerts set up in my calendar to make sure that because it refreshes after a certain number of days, that we're taking a look at things in real time so that we know that we're not making decisions based on old data, but we also, to Nate's point, you have a record of it if you ever need to refer back to how the engines responded. That's why Google Analytics annotations are a great thing. It lets you kind of use all these different data sources that I believe Google is at least attempting to consolidate in some way, shape, or form, but allowing you to be able to have one consistent dashboard to understand the impact of changes you may or may not have made to the website and the result in terms of traffic and visibility in the results pages.
Yeah. Yeah. And the last three things that I'll say about search analytics is to, one, remember to use it to build out your search personas. You know, this is a place where you do get keyword data and you can build out, you know, what your typical user is searching for and tag typical searches with those personas. Two, I mentioned it earlier, but don't forget to use the geographic overlay. You can not only use this in your persona build out, but you can also use it to expand your sense of market area and where there is potential. And then lastly, we had mentioned mobile last time with technical, but I also think it applies with on-page. And you can sort all these queries, pages, all your search analytics by device. And so if you see that certain types of content are getting mostly organic mobile traffic, you should customize the content to fit, you know, someone's mobile device to make sure that they have the right on-page experience and to go beyond, you know, just making sure it loads fast and whatnot.
And this is going to be essential in the coming months. You know, even looking at 2016 with how much mobile traffic is increasing, my opinion, looking towards 2016 is we've always said this is the year of mobile, this is the year of mobile. And I don't think anything's changing in terms of the fact that this is the year of mobile, but that it remains the year of mobile. And I think that we're starting to have distinct experiences on mobile and desktop as we understand more about what users are looking to accomplish on each device. And I think you're going to start to see the divide between mobile and desktop rankings change. You're going to start to see the types of people who are ranking on mobile versus desktop. There's going to be a little bit more volatility in there. And using Google Search Console to really look at your mobile and your desktop website, not independently of one another, but still looking at them independently. Having a fresh set of eyes on the data that's coming through and recognizing there's going to be differences in that data, I think is going to allow you to stay in front of this continuing mobile trend.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's so interesting to me to sort by device type and then look and see how the queries are just so different. You know, how desktop queries, at least on the sites that I have access to, are much more broad and general, and how mobile it's so much more. They want one piece of information right now. It's much more geographic focused. There's just it's a whole different approach to creating the content and providing the right experience.
It's a whole different approach to what are you doing? Navigation. You know,
yeah.
Mobile and desktop, how do you have different navigation? Because your linking elements are a huge, huge factor in how Google actually crawls your site. And these types of reports will really help you understand how to optimize those link elements.
Well, speaking of linkings, that was actually the next report within the search traffic report is, links to your site, but then also internal links. And this is a report. It's given in table format. and it shows all the target pages on your site, how many internal links point to those target pages. And if you click through, you can also figure out what pages are linking to those target pages. So you can basically get an understanding of how Google understands your site, how they see your content, and how is it all interlinked.
And I think, again, that's so important because this is kind of the nuts and bolts blocking and tackling of SEO. You have to optimize these internal linking elements. And it starts with knowing what you should be optimizing for. What are we overloading on certain anchor text? Are we missing anchor text for certain pages? How are we going to be able to understand what links, how many links are on a page, what pages are being linked to excessively? You start to recognize, all right, linking to a page 5 times from every page, from every other page, probably not the best experience and probably not taking the advantage of our variations in anchor text and link distribution that we know Google looks for a natural user experience. And so I think this is one where, again, there's nothing sexy or fancy about this internal links report. There's nothing that you're going to be like, oh man, I had a life-changing experience figuring out how to leverage this particular part of Google Search Console, but it's one of those really, really kind of fundamental aspects that you want to make sure that you're going in there and being conscious of in terms of what are your most linked to pages internally? What type of anchor text are you using? Are your top priority pages really linked to accordingly? And I think using this report gives you an understanding of priorities. It gives you an understanding of the state of affairs of your website, as opposed to looking at it through this kind of ideal lens that some people say, oh, our internal linking is great. I'm like, all right, well, what are your top linked pages? Oh, well, I don't know. Then how are you basing the argument that your internal linking is great if you don't know your most heavily linked pages? And I think having more of an objective, data-driven approach to this helps us say, you told us that X, Y, and Z were the top priorities for your site. They're not even in the top 50% in terms of pages that are being linked to. This is good for being able to make a case for your clients if you're on the agency side, or to your superiors and supervisors if you're in-house. It gives you the opportunity to be able to recognize the reality versus what our ideal distribution of links will be, and helps you craft a plan that moves towards that more ideal balance between internal link signals. Yeah,
this is one thing that my site, but also a lot of sites that are set up in a blog format. I know I had clients who have this problem where a lot of times I call it age discrimination with links, where your old content is the one that gets all your internal links, and your newest stuff, which a lot of times tends to be the best, doesn't get the same internal links pointing to that new content as your old stuff does, just because it hasn't been around. You haven't been linking to it as for as long. And this is something that the internal links report can bring out, the same way with an e-commerce site. Your new products often won't have the same link distribution as your old products. And it's something that it makes it very, very straightforward and simple, but it's, like Brett said, it's the fundamentals that you have to actually execute on. You have to go in and get this information and then go and make changes, rather than chasing, the next shiny thing that may or may not pay off. This is something that pays off, and it's something that Search Console makes very easy because it's something that Google wants you to do.
So let's wrap it up here and talk, kind of continuing along this link trend, let's wrap it up a little bit by talking about some of the off-page signals. Google Webmaster Tools, one of the most heavily criticized aspects of Google Webmaster Tools was the links to your site section. And this was because it was a suboptimal user experience, but it's also Google makes such a big deal over the importance of links and how you want to be able to naturally and organically build links, but they give you very little information about what is a good link. What types of links are you even getting? That, a lot of times in the SEO industry in particular, we take for granted, the fact that most people don't have this intimate understanding of the value of links. And so having the links to your site section was Google's way of telling you, here are the links we've identified. And I don't know about you, Nate. I really, anytime I saw that, it was all crappy links. It was never anything that I looked at and was like, oh, wow, all of our great, PR and media mentions are here. There was a lot. It was a lot of low quality. It was a lot of links that didn't even make sense. I didn't know where they came from. I knew nothing about the site. Couldn't find them when I did a manual check. And so this was a very heavily criticized, justifiably criticized part of Google Webmaster Tools. But they are starting to invest in improvements in this platform that allow us as SEOs and as marketers to really extract some additional insights.
Yeah, and I think the key to making it useful is number one in the interface is to keep clicking. So when you first look at the report, like Brett said, you'll see a lot of just domains that you've never heard before, or if you do see a domain that you're like, why in the world do I have a link from google.com? And the key is to just keep clicking and keep following those links, and eventually Google will tell you where it found this link. And a lot of times it has an explanation. It may or may not be satisfactory, but there is some data behind, or there is some reason behind the data that Google gives you. That said, I think, and I think Brett would agree, that we like to use Google Search Console and these links as a complement to more user-friendly and a lot of times more useful backlink checkers, like Ahrefs or OpenSite Explorer, SEMrush, Majestic are all kind of the big ones in our industry. And that the common denominator between Google Search Console and something like Ahrefs is Excel. And that is, you can always take these links that Google gives you and just download the table, download the sample links, put it in Excel, and merge it with the other pieces of data that you already have. And a lot of times Google will give you a much better picture, or the data that you can pull from Ahrefs or Moz, with things like domain authority, page authority, will give you some context on how to actually make this data useful.
No, and I think that's one of those things where, again, it's the fact that it's Google giving you information about you. We've used it to identify issues that may need the disavow tool. We've used it to identify potential spam techniques that were being incorporated by people outside of our client's building. And so there is a lot of value to this. The complement with other tools like Ahrefs and Excel, identifying this negative SEO. For one of ours, an example that we saw recently, we had, of their top linked phrases, we had 49 of the top 50 was essentially their marquee keyword. They're a national company with broken down by individual states. So they were talking about, it's in the financial space. They were talking about mortgages. So they talked about mortgages in Virginia, in Florida, in Georgia, in Pennsylvania, in Connecticut, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we started to realize that, hey, this wasn't us. I don't know where this came from. So it does also give you a trigger in terms of what Google is picking up about your site, so that you are not surprised and you're able to be proactive about things that don't make sense to you.
Yeah, and to me, I think that's the most valuable way to use it. And it's the most valuable way for business owners who might not have a subscription to Ahrefs or Moz. You want to go in here and look for outliers, for things that just don't fit. When you look at the anchor text report or your most linked content, does something really just not stand out? And when you go and click through that, do you see something that you shouldn't be seeing? And so even if Google isn't providing all the data that they have, a lot of times it's enough to be able to get you going in the right direction, or to start a thread, at least, I would say.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, Google Search Console is just another one of the multitude of tools that we have to understand how to optimize our websites. I've said this, I say this to my staff all the time. I've said this on the podcast numerous times, but SEO is nothing more than a grand experiment in reverse engineering. Google Search Console provides you information to be able to help enforce or influence that reverse engineering. Looking at everything from the content to the keywords, links, we're talking about links internal and external, the different technical aspects, being able to submit content to Google. There's a lot that can be done within Google Search Console if you take the time to learn it. And hopefully these last two episodes will have given our listeners an opportunity to really appreciate the value that Google Search Console can provide. And if it's something that you've just kind of had on the back burner, go in there, carve out an hour and a half, and just start clicking around. And I think you'll be amazed at the amount of information that's available to you and how it gets you thinking about where to take your marketing campaigns as we move into 2016.
All right. Well, you can find previous episodes, including part 1 of the series, links to things that we've mentioned, and our contact information at bamboochalupa.com. If you don't want to miss another episode, go subscribe to the podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. And do leave a comment and rating while you're there. We learn a lot from your feedback, and your ratings helps others to discover the show. So for Brett Snyder, I'm Nate Shiver. Thank you for listening.